Hello, and welcome to the Tuning In podcast. I'm Dana Evans, your inner voice and emotional support coach. In this podcast, we explore the deep wisdom that lives in our bodies, emotions, and inner voice. Together, we'll shed the layers that no longer serve us, creating space to tap into the flow of life and experience true ease. So, are you ready to join me? Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Tuning In podcast. Today, I'm going to talk about a recap from my recent trip, some learnings that I think are super applicable to anyone going on trips, especially with larger groups of people, and some takeaways that I have from actually being gone and disconnected for a long period of time. Okay, so let's start with I was gone for 11 days. 11 nights, 12 days. And that's a really long time. I have not done a trip like that in a while. And I was in another country. So I traveled, I got away, and I really got away. One of the things that happened when I came back is I had trouble integrating back home. Not so much in like the dynamic, but in my sleep. I woke up very confused. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know who this furry animal was in my bed next to me, Mia, not John. But I would wake up and tap John like on the face and be like, "Who are you?" And I had some like crazy like stress wake ups where I'd like be like punching and hitting. So it was a very intense time away and time back because I think I was gone so much. I was so far away and I was gone for so long, and I hadn't done that in a while, certainly not since moving to Santa Fe. So coming home, I even said to John, I said, I feel disconnected from home right now. And he reminded me, he's like, well, you were away, like far, far away in a land far, far away. But I want to point that out for a moment because if you really think about it, how often do we get a chance to really disconnect from our lives, to really take ourselves as we exist and move ourselves out of our regular life? For me, it's not often. I don't know what your experience is, but think about your daily responsibilities, the people you're checking in with and connecting with on a regular basis, the routines and rituals that you have, the places that you go, the things that you do, the things you see. Even if we go away for a short period of time, but we're in a similar area, I feel like we kind of carry ourselves with us. So what was really different for me about this trip is that I felt like I was plucked. So I took me from Santa Fe and I was picked up, and then I was dropped in the Bahamas. And I was with a completely new group of people in a completely different place with completely different circumstances and surroundings. And with that, I too had a chance to be different, y'all. This is what's so crazy. So when I think about my daily life, we tend to become familiar with the way we live, and then we fit into a form and a mold of who we are in that environment, right? We work within our environments. So I'm very regularly communicating with the same people, seeing the same things, doing the same things. I have my routines. They make my life efficient, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, all of a sudden I was moved into this different environment with different people, and the expectations of me and the expectations that I carry for myself suddenly were like gone. I wasn't aware of this initially in the trip. I wasn't aware of this as what was happening, but I was able to reflect on it toward the end. But I was traveling with my two cousins who I see once a year for this trip. We're close, but it's like the trip is where we really like make our deep connection because we spend that really uninterrupted time together. And then one of my cousin's husband and then their friend. So there are 5 of us total. None of these people I spend time with or have like regular engagement with in my day-to-day life. Okay, so that was thing 1. I could kind of show up in a different way. I'm going to talk more about that in a second. Thing 2 is I live in a desert. High desert. Yes, we have snow. Yes, we have mountains. But think about the terrain of a desert. I was suddenly literally on a beach. Like our patio walked out to the ocean. We were on a private beach. It was called Love's Beach. Like, can you even? There were 5 houses on that beach and that was it. And we saw like no one else. So all of a sudden I'm on a shore And I'm on East Coast time, so my time difference is really obvious as I'm like sleeping and waking. Those cycles are different. We're in the Bahamas. I think we are close to the equator. I could be wrong. But anytime I feel like I'm like in ocean areas, there's a different timing in terms of like sunrise and sunset. So the day felt a little bit different. And then of course I'm away from work. So I'm not working. I really took that time off. I went 6 days without opening my computer or even checking my email. And for me, email checking is like a compulsive thing and it's a problem. I'm working on it. I most of the time have to keep email off of my phone. Yeah, I deleted the email from my phone and I did not check email until 6 days into the trip when I knew I was waiting for an email and I had to respond to it. That is the longest time I've gone without checking email in forever. It's not like I even get important emails. Truthfully, it's just I want to check. So all of a sudden, like I was in a different environment and I could choose to operate and act on different ways of being. So not checking email was a big one. Not opening my computer was a big one. Also, I didn't do the international phone service. So we had Wi-Fi at the house. And for the most part, I only was checking my phone in the morning and the evening. And mostly I like left my phone upstairs or I would leave it on airplane mode and use it to take photos. So like these are big things that I don't do in day-to-day life. And all of a sudden I was in a new environment and able to do those things. Also, my schedule was such that I was waking up before most people in the house. And so I was kind of waking up and doing like my own little mini solo routine in the morning. And I'd go down to the beach and make my coffee. I was drinking coffee differently. I was having different morning supplements. Like it's so crazy if you really allow it. I actively chose to not take my routines with me because I was like, I'm just going to enter the environment and like see what happens. So that was a big thing is I was waking up and taking some different supplements, more of like to support me while traveling, and then having more coffee than normal, which weirdly, I felt like I had no effect on me. Like at home, even now that I'm back, I'll have like a half a cup of coffee, say 4 ounces of coffee, and I freaking feel the buzz. I'm like, I need food to pair with this. There, I was easily having a full cup of coffee and not feeling the effects, like in a good way. Like it wasn't making me feel jittery or edgy or any of that. So that was another different thing. I was definitely drinking more. I think I've shared recently that my alcohol consumption has like drastically dropped. Well, it drastically increased in that like I was probably having a drink or two most days that I was there. And also that felt fine in my body. So it's so interesting when you kind of flow with wherever you are, how things might change. Also, a couple days alcohol really didn't sound good and I didn't drink, which is also a very like new thing for me to like be like, oh, I don't want to drink and then not have one, especially in a group environment. And that felt really good and like a sign of just my own evolution. So that was a really beautiful experience to witness myself within. I was also sleeping. I had a room to myself, right? And so at home, I have John and Mia in bed with me. So to sleep in a bed by myself was so awesome. And I didn't have like a partner there, right? So it was just me. And I didn't really have to think about what John needed or what John wanted or what Mia needed or wanted for that matter. I also didn't really engage a ton with the people in my life, which might sound crazy to you, but for me, this feels really good to get that kind of space. So I think John and I talked on the phone maybe twice. And then I'd like message him. I always, when I'm away, message him good night or good morning. But we weren't like engaging for the most part. I wasn't doing my magical morning practice. I had minimal interaction with my parents. I did talk to a couple of people, but like I did kind of radically shift who I was engaging with, and my presence and focus was on the people I was with. And there was a lot of engagement there. So that was something that was also radically different in my life, is that all of a sudden I'm in a group of people and we're on vacation together and we're doing everything together. More than I would like normally. You know, my day-to-day life is pretty spacious. I'm not engaging with a lot of people except digitally when I want to. There's not a lot of like social interaction. I'm not hanging out a lot. Like even John and I have, you know, he's working during the day, and then when he's done working, he goes on a run, and then I'm eating dinner, and we have a lot of separation in our schedules. So all of a sudden it was like basically from the time everyone else woke up, which was like an hour after me, until I like extracted myself because I absolutely needed to go to bed, I was like engaged and like with a group of people. and it was crazy. So different for me. So, that sometimes can be extremely hard for me. And I can get really, really, really worn out on trips like this because it's so different from my life and from what I'm used to. And I'm someone who really requires a lot of space to engage. And if I don't get space, then it affects my sleep and then it affects my mood the next day. And it's just not great if I have to be constantly engaged. But for some reason on this trip, it didn't bother me that much. And I felt really comfortable and confident to just know when I was done and extract myself. So it was definitely a balance of what was expected and what other people wanted, with me being really clear of my own needs and drawing a line. For example, one of the people in the group, or two of them actually, one of them has the most energy of anyone I've ever freaking met. And I'm like, how are you not tired? And every night, after dinner, after a full day, of beaching, chilling, adventures, it did not matter. Whatever, we could have had the busiest day or the least busy day. After dinner, he wanted to watch a movie. And every day the day he's like, watch a movie, come watch a movie. I was like, no, you're never going to get me to watch a nighttime movie. Rarely is anyone going to get me to watch a nighttime movie. I'm just not available after dinner for social engagement. Certainly not for entertainment. I don't like watching shows or TV in bed or before bed. No, I want to read quietly, do my somatic exercises. Or on this trip, it was really interesting. I was on Instagram before bed, which I never, ever do. Okay. But this trip, because maybe I wasn't using it during the day, I actually found it to be a nice way for me to unwind. And I would Instagram, watch or scroll Instagram before bed, and then I'd go to sleep and I'd sleep great. Wake up in the morning, do a little Instagram check, and then I wouldn't really be on it for most of the day. At home, that doesn't work for me. That's not a good practice for me. It does not feel good. On the trip, it did. So I guess what I'm really wanting to point out here is that when I returned home and said to John that I was feeling disconnected from home, it's because I disconnected from home. And I think it was really supportive for me. So yes, there were challenges to the trip. Yes, it was more activity than I would normally want. Yes, I got tired. Yes, there were other things. But for the most part, by releasing expectation of what I need to do or how I should be, or trying to carry over my routines and my expectations of my life here onto that trip, by releasing all of that, I actually was surprisingly fluid and energized in what I was able to do and participate in. And I really I remember coming home and thinking, gosh, I haven't been tired in 10 days. And if you've listened to this podcast or watched my Instagram at all, being tired is kind of a common thing for me, especially on trips. But there was something different. And I do feel it might be related to just this releasing of the rigidity that I can carry about what needs to happen within me to be okay. And I just kind of flowed with it. I really enjoyed that experience of being in the flow. And I found that I was more able to kind of say, okay, well, let's just go do this, or okay, let's go do that. And it's funny because I found that kind of behind the scenes, I might feel ooh, I don't know. But then when I was up to bat, when it was up to me to make a choice or a decision, I was more able to just flow with it. And the other thing that showed up during that time was I was in more of a witness role. And I've been seeing this in my life recently, so I'm not surprised it showed up here, but I've been in more of a witness role. It's really easy for me to get really invested and involved in the group, right? The community and what's going on. And I can even kind of lose myself in that. But there was something about this trip that allowed me to be 1 degree separated. So I didn't feel as involved in everything that was going on. And it had me thinking about, when we're in groups, I see this all the time and I've experienced this. I've been the person doing this, whether you're on a family trip or a friend trip, or, I was on a trip that was a combination of both. It can be really difficult for individuals to find the balance between this is what I want to do and this is what is going to be good for the group. And finding the balance between like making yourself happy, also making yourself happy and putting expectations on the rest of the group to do that. And then feeling the need to like make sure everyone else is happy and like take care of everyone else instead of yourself. And there's this like push and pull that I see over and over and over again in groups of like, it can bring out the people pleasers in us. And it can also bring out like the kid, the like kid that stomps and says, I want this, like, I don't know if you've felt that energy, but I've definitely felt it in myself in both of those roles. And this time I was more just like in the witness seat of, and I didn't plan this trip. So I think it allowed that to be the case for me. But it was really powerful to just like witness and not be overly stressed. Like, how often do you go on a trip and you're stressed because you think this person isn't having a good time, or you're stressed because everyone doesn't want to do the thing you want to do, or you're stressed. And it's like, how much is that like becomes about handling our own emotions and being like, oh, this is triggering me. What's going on? Or, oh, why do I feel like I can't do this thing by myself? Or why do I feel like if someone wants to do something by themselves that like that's not okay and everyone has to do everything together? Like, it's a really fun thing to actually witness the energy of like supporting ourselves in like whatever we're noticing, and like being able to take the time to say, oh, I need some space, and speaking up and just saying, oh, I'm just not going to do that thing, and like it being okay. And then 2, trusting that others can do the same. I feel like when our people pleasing tendencies kind of come online, what happens is it's like becomes your responsibility to make sure everyone else is having a good time. And that's not your responsibility. I mean, maybe it is if you're a tour guide. But like when you're in like a group vacation, like that's not your responsibility. And our people pleasing tendencies can make us take things on that aren't ours. So it's like if someone's, feeling bummed out that day, or tired, or they don't want to do the thing, like trust them to figure their shit out. Right. And then trust you to figure your shit out. And there's like this thing with the group where it's like we all have to do everything together, or we don't do anything together. I've witnessed this for years and years and years in any group thing I do. And it's like, oh, what if it's okay for us to like, some people do it, some people don't. And it's all very like dependent on like what feels good for the individual. And I just think it's so fun to be able to watch that and see how that plays out whenever you're, traveling with a group. I don't know. There's something there about like trusting yourself and trusting each other. It's like we're all here to be on vacation, so we don't need to add the extra pressure of stress and expectation and like demands and all of that. It's like we can really trust each other. So I loved watching that in the trip, or watching myself in the trip, like noticing like, ooh, I want to people please, or, I don't want to do this. And can I say that? Or, ooh, I want to go to bed. And is that okay? Like really just kind of leaning into myself, like listening to that inner voice. The song that just keeps playing in my head about a lot of things lately is like, you gotta know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, know when to run, right? Excuse my singing. I feel like there's a lot of wisdom in that song. So that was really beautiful. Okay, let me tell you a fun thing. One of the people in the group, it's fun to like witness other people's beliefs. So one thing that happened for me while I was there is I was able to really step into that group as I am now, as I see my own evolution. And guess what? That's a lot easier to do with a group of people who aren't like engaged with you all the time than it is to do with your partner and your friends that you've had forever and the people you talk to every day. Like evolution and shift, it can be really subtle, and you as an individual might not even notice how much you've grown until you're removed from the environment that you grew in. There is something here because we're constantly in relationship, right? We're in relationship to our environment, in relationship to our habits, in relationship to the people in our lives. And that means they all have a projection of you as well. And it can be really easy to fall in line with how other people see you, or how you are in a certain environment, or how you are with your family or your husband or your cat. Like, there's something going on there that when I picked myself up and then was dropped in a new location with new people, I realized that the me who's been evolving for the past few years, she's the one who was on that trip. It's not Dana in Santa Fe. It was Dana who's been on this path for many, many years. And I felt really self-assured. I told you I was feeling like more observant in the witnessing role. I felt like my voice was strong. People asked for my opinions and I shared them, and I didn't feel inferior or like I didn't have the right answers. Like I felt really safe and comfortable to just like talk and share as who I am. And I felt extremely magnetic. And this is part of my personality that I adore and very much can be like turned on or turned off based on the energetics of my environment. And so like, I feel like in my day-to-day life at home, it's like routine, right? So I end up not often tapping into that magnetism, but to be living in it for multiple days in a row, I was like, oh, this is fun. This is potent. This is powerful. Like, I like how this feels. And so I was able to kind of like play with aspects of me and my personality that have been evolving, but maybe haven't been able to be turned on and activated in a while. So again, recognizing in yourself, like, what do different people bring out of you? Certain friends, certain family members, like, what do they bring out of you? And then when you are engaging with different people, like, what do they bring out of you? And it's like, how can we kind of merge the two? Like, I want more of that magnetism. I want more of that, like, really confident, strong voice that's not combative. It's not defensive. It's just like authentic and clear and like, oh, well, this is my perspective. This is how I see things, without any need or expectation that others see things the way I do. It was a really fun experience. And I think that for all of us, I think that's where there's so much power, even introverts, right? I am an introvert. I consider myself an introvert. Don't ask my family. They wouldn't believe you because I can talk a lot, but I do generally consider myself an introvert, but I see also the deep value of engaging with new people and new environments because it brings out different sides of your personality and sides that you may haven't even known were like really active and that needed to frickin' come out and shine. And then it's fun and dynamics to like watch the beliefs of others. Because again, we can easily take on and fall in sync with the beliefs of the people around us, right? It's like you're talking to the same people, you're having similar conversations. And you might even, of course, hang out with people mostly that share a lot of similar belief systems as you do. But it's so fun to be with new people and to witness like their thinking and their beliefs and like their behaviors. But one that I freaking loved was one of the people on the trip. He got injured a few times on the trip, like not like terrible injuries, but like things happen. And I remember the first time it happened, he said, well, that's okay. I heal really well. And I was like, oh my gosh, I said, I love that belief system. He said, well, it's true. And I'm like, well, yeah, and it's going to be more true because you so believe that. So I'm like, I'm going to take that on. Like, I'm going to adopt that. Like, I heal really well. So that was really fun to kind of just like listen for the way people see themselves and the way other people engage in the world and what parts of that you want to take on, you know, like, oh, that person's really fluid with that. That person's really good at planning. That person really likes to do a bunch of activities. That person really wants to have like some quality time, you know, one-to-one time. And you just kind of get to see how people are in this environment and kind of adopt the things that feel really, really good. Okay, so I'm going to continue one other aspect. I took notes on this, so I wanted to share this. I wrote, when traveling with a group, you quickly get to realize what your standards are, what matters the most to you. Choose those things and be willing to release the rest. That way you can flow without losing yourself. So you can go with the flow without losing yourself in the flow. And I think I've alluded to this in this episode so far, or I directly addressed that in this episode so far. But what I wrote down is, for me, it's holding true to my bedtime, keeping the kitchen clean, hydration, and having clarity and limits around alcohol. It wasn't perfect every day, but I was clear of where I stood on each of those, and it really helped me regulate. Because the thing is, when we're with a group, it can be very easy to get caught up in their emotions, like someone else's emotional state, and or get dysregulated because you're like, you know, maybe pulled in many directions. And it's like our nervous systems will tend to regulate with the strongest energy. So if one person's energy is like really crazy strong, like we're all going to tend to meet that level. That's just what happens in group dynamics. So when you can get really clear on what matters to you, like I said, I didn't carry all of my routines with me, but when you're clear on what matters to you, you can stay connected to yourself and to your inner voice. And you can also not be so rigid that you can't just like flow with whatever's happening. But it also protects you from getting too lost in other people's energy, which is a huge thing that can happen in groups. So for me, as I said, my bedtime and then keeping the kitchen clean, this is like a hack of mine. It's not even conscious at this point. It's just like something that I love doing is I just kind of take responsibility for the cleanliness of the kitchen and the cleanliness to like my standard. I want it to be very clean. So almost every day I would make sure, like multiple times a day, I would do a tidy, but then, before bed, I would do my best to really like clean the kitchen. Like I would load the dishwasher, run the dishwasher, wipe down all the counters, clear things out and just make sure, because I was also the first person up in the morning for the most part. I would even prep the coffee and then I'd go down and it was like, I had a clean kitchen, and that really, really, really calms my nervous system. What I didn't do was obsessively tidy the house, which I have definitely done in the past. And I get like a little uptight about keeping the house clean. I did some tidying. I definitely kept my stuff like contained in my room, but I was more fluid. And I'm like, this is the area that matters to me. This is like my zone of control. And I'm going to do the kitchen. And beyond that, I'm going to be a little more relaxed, which is a big deal for me, by the way, to relax around those things. And then hydration, I had like hydration drops and hydration packets and the cell food oxygen drops that are like good for your immune system. And then, like I said, alcohol, I definitely was drinking way more than I normally do because I recently have been drinking, like once a week or twice a week max, but still being mindful of like not tipping myself into so much that it didn't feel good, right? And that came surprisingly naturally to me. In the couple nights that like we did get a little tipsy, like it actually felt natural and organic and fun and light, and I felt great and fine the next day. So I could tell the energy behind drinking was a lot different. So yeah, I think that's just like a really powerful one of recognizing where you want to like hold your standards and then where you can let go, and remembering when you can, having alone time. I had that alone time in the morning and I had it before bed. That gave me time to decompress and like kind of shed other people's energy so that I could kind of come back to my own energy. I would listen to the ocean waves to fall asleep. Obviously swimming, laying in the sand, like all of these things are very grounding. And so there's a lot of practices that are just available when you're on a trip that you can kind of get away, like even a little mini beach walk by yourself that allows you to kind of come back to your own energy and stay really regulated. So those are some of my big takeaways from the trip. And I took quite a few notes on just like reflections of things that I'm going to bring back in my business, but I just wanted to share those initial downloads. And again, it was this beautiful trip. Oh, I should just share too, like food wise, I just kind of went with the flow of island food. We brought a bunch of food. We packed meat because we all have meat standards. So I brought a bunch of meat from my butcher. My cousins brought meat. I brought cheese from my butcher. I brought gluten-free crackers. So most nights we cooked, and we made steaks, we got local lobster tail and the food itself and some vegetables. And it was a really simple eating with high quality food. And then when I went out, I ate the local food. I ate grouper with like the local fish. I ate mostly grouper and lobster tail. Like I ate a lot of seafood, which I don't eat at home at all. So that was also another thing. And it always helps me on my trips is just like trying to kind of flow with the local food and not get so uptight about how I eat, because that can create a lot of stress. But staying as simple as possible is always helpful for my body, because it's like, okay, like this is the local food, this is what's available. and let's keep it simple. And again, in the past, I've been like stressed about food and eating and the quality and all those things. And this trip, it was just really fluid. So there's a download of the trip. Thoroughly enjoyed myself. I got tan. I got my freckles. They came out. I felt really healthy and magnetic. There were definitely some challenges because there always are when you're traveling with a group. But overall, I think we did a great job, and it was a really special time that we got to spend together, deep quality time. And that is my highest value, definitely my love language as well. So thank you as always for listening. I hope this episode kind of gave you something to think about for your next trip, and we'll see you next time on the Tuning In podcast. Thank you for joining me in another episode of the Tuning In podcast. If you loved this episode, please rate and review it or share it with a friend. If you want to go deeper into the realm of emotions and learn the language of your body, check out my audio course, Emotions Decoded, at alignful.com/audio. As always, you can follow along with my journey on Instagram at Dana_Evans. See you next week.